Yeah, against this right back, Charlie, definitely.
Because you always use that active red light defending. I think it's like.
People deluded, I'm back again.
Come on, Ian. Come on. As the big man Ian Wright just said there, people deluded, I'm back again. Special guest settings. Tom, how you doing? Happy New Year's to you and yours. And appreciative to have you back on my platform, man. How you doing?
Pleasure, mate. Happy New Year to you and yours as well, mate. How's it been?
Come on, my guy. Again, I say it's unfortunate because I love having you on my platform. I love the way you look at football and stuff like that. Obviously, the current climate of Arsenal, I'm pretty sure you see on social media, you've seen the results. A lot has been said. As I always say, if you want sunshine, then you have to be prepared to go through the rain. And if you get rain, you have to be prepared to go through the mud. We can't be naive and see what's gone on with Chelsea, Man United. And probably since August, we've been ticking over, but we can't be naive and assume that we wasn't going to hit a blip. Now, whether we get out of this blip and we look back and say that was just a bad time, or this is what made or break our season, we're going to have to see in due course, people. But Tom, I want to ask you though, what have you made of our recent form, man? It ain't been good, has it?
No, it's not. It's been pretty damn poor, to be fair. And I think obviously it stems from one specific point, which is obviously goal scoring. We can't get the ball in the back of the net at the moment. And I think I was speaking to a friend of mine, James Green, who works at Sky the other day on the show, and I think he summed it up quite well. He said if the Fulham game was representative of the last 5 games, then he'd be really, really worried. But the fact of the matter is that Fulham game felt like a bit of an anomaly amongst a group of games that we created plenty in and deserved a lot more from. And it's that I think gives us more encouragement to not panic and think that if we can start putting the ball in the back of the net, things will change very quickly.
I'm with you with that. I think the Fulham game was terrible. You know, there's really no positives. That kind of takes me back a few months to, I think, West Ham in the League Cup, where I would say those 2 games were kind of on par in that there's no positives. I think prior to that, I was kind of more upset in the games we drew than the games we lost. For instance, you know, we shot ourselves in the foot against Chelsea and Spurs. And then you look at the Newcastle game, the West Ham game, the Aston Villa game, and all the others where we've actually, West Ham at home, where we've actually done all right. We've probably been the better team. Now, of course, being the better team doesn't mean anything. You need to get the 3 points, but I do share that point. You mentioned goal scoring. What do you put it down to? Do you put it down to the players not putting the ball in the back of the net? Because I feel that Arteta's kind of coached a great game plan, and again, simply put, the players ain't put the ball in the back of the net, and that goes for every player. I don't know if that's psychological factors, or do you go with the manager? Because if I play devil's advocate, you know, when I praise Arteta, I have to give him his flowers, and when it's, you know, goes poorly, I have to ask questions, and ultimately everything's a reflection of the manager. And you could argue that, you know, with Gabriel Jesus and Eddie Nketiah, maybe in the summer we could have dealt with a striker. So what do you put the goal scoring down to, or better yet, lack of goal scoring, better yet?
Yeah, I do think it is more the players. Obviously, they're the ones that have got to stick the ball in the back of the net. Arteta's system is creating those chances. His philosophy has got you 30 shooting opportunities against West Ham, 18 against Liverpool.
And all those touches in the box as well.
77, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, crazy.
So how we're playing is getting us into those situations. We're just snatching at shots. We're not hitting them cleanly. And I think that comes down to confidence. I think it's also frustration. I was at the Emirates for the game against Liverpool, and I just felt like the players were getting so irritated by decisions not going their way. They were lacking composure. They were thinking the world was against them. And sometimes you just have to rise above that as a team.
Exactly.
You have to be mentally strong enough to just, you know, get past the fact that, you know, if the ref's not giving you the decisions you want, your last shot didn't go as well as it wanted, but you didn't receive the pass the way you wanted in the last moment, and just keep going. And I think this run has been really challenging for this team because they've not been in a situation like this for quite some time. Yes, we had that situation at the end of last season where we drew against Southampton and West Ham, and then the title started to kind of fall away from us. But across the season, whenever we lost a game or drew a game, we responded almost immediately. When we drew at Southampton, we won the next game. You know, when we lost against Man City at home, I think we won the next game. So, you know, we responded pretty quick. This time around, we're not. You know, and again, I think that the decisions, the Aston Villa game, we argue we should have had a penalty. We're very unlucky not to get the goal at the end. With, you know, it's handball by the rules, but the rules are stupid because you know, it can graze your finger and suddenly that goal shouldn't count. So they feel very aggrieved, and And I think mentally, that is the reason as to why things have not been going well. And if you're going to win a title, you need to be mentally stronger.
Do you think so? Would it be fair to say they're struggling psychologically then?
I think they are struggling psychologically. Yeah, I do. I think they're obviously in a situation where they've come off the back of last season, where they were riding the wave of overachievement because no one expected us to do what we were doing
Yeah,
last season. And I think that's also a big contribution to the atmosphere difference last season and this season as well, is that expectations have gone through the roof. If we're not winning a game within 10 minutes, all of a sudden it's why haven't we scored? And I think from the players' perspective as well, it's the expectation of repeating and that being the minimum of what we expected them to do again, what they did when it was such a big effort last season, such a form was going our way and we had momentum. As soon as you start to lose momentum to try and find it again, and teams that you're coming up against start to see chinks in the armor that they can exploit, like Fulham and West Ham have, then it becomes really difficult. And you lose that fear factor that maybe we built up over the course of last season and the start of this season again.
I think that's facts, man. You touched on it there, and that's something that some Arsenal fans have been quite critical on. What have you made of the atmosphere this season?
Yeah, it's not been as good as it was last season, but it's probably about the same as it was the season before that, and the season before that, and the season before that, and the season before that. So,
an anomaly,
you know, I get into a fair few debates with people about the atmosphere in the grounds. You know, I've been to nearly every home game this season, and I felt as though it is the expectations of last season impacting things more than anything else. Yes, we've seen the Ashburn Army's allocation cut in half. Yes, we've seen the ballot system introduced. I think there is far too much weight placed on those things and not enough realism about the fact that our form has not been as good. We're not playing necessarily as well. And the expectations that we should be winning every single game at a canter. And then when we suddenly start to struggle, that it drops, you know. I think that last season when Saliba scored that own goal, or when West Ham scored on Boxing Day, you know, and you heard this massive roar from the crowd. You know, it was a reaction that we've not seen in the same way this season. I think when things have got, yes, there's been some reaction to some situations, but typically it hasn't been the same response because it's now, I wasn't expecting that of us. I thought we were better than this. And I think maybe that's creeped into people's minds. But I don't think the ballot system has had a because there's 46,000 season ticket holders in that ground. You know, that's more than 2/3 of the stadium. You know, you have to take some ownership at the end of the day and say, we have to be better. We can't just start pointing at supposed tourist fans and saying that 50 less Ashburton Army are changing things so dramatically that 45,000 season ticket holders, amongst them, the majority of are indeed there in their seats. So, yeah, I think that sometimes you have to look within more than blaming elsewhere.
Do you think, kind of carrying on that theme with the atmosphere, do you think that's playing on the players?
I think maybe in some ways, yeah. I think it's not just obviously in the ground. I think that obviously online things change, the conversations change. Players get, as we know, messages. They're constantly online. You know, I see the players relatively regularly after the games. They're always on their phones. They're always looking at things.
Don't live in the bubble, yeah.
It's impossible to not. You know, you care what people think. It's a very human thing to do. And so I think that, yes, maybe they're lacking. You see Odegaard all the time trying to whip the crowd up. You know, Zinchenko does it as well. They want more from the crowd, and yeah, we can be better as fans. I think I say that, you know, from the privileged position of sitting in the press box. But if I'm in that ground, you know, I'd be trying to do the absolute maximum that I can to get behind that team. And yes, it's frustrating when we go a goal down, but you got to keep fighting for them because they're, you know, hopefully they keep fighting for us.
I think you're bang on the money. I do think it's a two-way street. I feel there's times in the season where your players might be down on their luck and the fans have to kind of get them through it rightly. So I think sometimes the players might be in an okay place mentally and the fans might not be, you know, galvanized and you have to pull them up. But typically, I think it's a twofold street. I think many fans home and away will give the players the energy that they require. But I do think the players need to be giving something to the fans and vice versa. And I think in terms of the blip we've hit, I think there's many more conversations, and I'm sure you would agree, than the atmosphere. I think, you know, let's get back to scoring goals. Let's get back to defending to high standards, and then everything will fall into place. Kind of what you said, you know, I do think it's a twofold in that we failed to win the league and we weren't expected to. But naturally, because of the way the players played, they galvanized the fans. And it's like every game, it was a bit of an avalanche or a snowball effect, and it just got better and better. So hopefully we can get back to better times. You mentioned chinks in our armor. What would you say have you seen chinks in the armor? Obviously, I'll help you out with one. Obviously, we're not scoring goals. Has there been anything in midfield? How do you feel about our defending? How do you think of how Mikel Arteta is utilizing squad players and just everything in relation to that, man?
Yeah, I think in terms of in possession, we're less direct in our play. Yeah, I think through the middle of the pitch when we had Thomas Partey, last season, Partey was the most available he's ever been for us, and I don't think that's
40
any
games, 33
coincidence
in the
that
league, I think.
coincided. Yeah, what was it? 30? Was it 33?
33
Premier
in
League
the
games?
Prem, 40 in all
Yeah,
comps. Unheard of for Thomas Partey, really.
exactly. And we've gone from that to his least availability this
Yeah.
season. But the difference is we have Declan Rice. Now, Declan Rice is a different type of midfielder. He's, in my opinion, a world-class midfielder, especially in a deeper role. His tackling is excellent. His reading of the
Quality
game is
numbers.
excellent. His physicality is insane. But he is a different type of progressor to Partey. You'll see Rice tend to spread the play to overlapping fullbacks or to the wide players. And I'd like to see Rice be more direct. It's not saying he doesn't do some things in a direct fashion. He does. But I would like to see that happen more. I also think the change of system to have two attack-minded eights rather than a six and then a Xhaka, who of course was also very direct in the way that he would progress the ball forwards as well, has changed things. I think it's unfair to say that Havertz or anybody else is coming into the quote-unquote Xhaka role. I think you can't template that onto another player.
Two
Another
different
player
players.
comes in and they're their own player, their own characteristics, their own
Exactly.
traits. And so Arteta's instructions to that left eight is for them to be who they are and do what their strengths are. So Havertz wants to get into the box. Havertz wants to get into those areas as best he can. When he receives the ball in deeper areas, he'll try and lay it off quickly rather than, as Xhaka would do, take the ball, turn, touch, spot the pass forwards, go forwards. That's the way he plays. That's what we've come to expect. Havertz would rather carry it sometimes, I think, or just a little layoff here and there. But his best work comes as close and in the box as feasibly possible. So we don't have that same type of presence because we don't have the same player there. I think that Arteta, to solve these issues, needs to do what he did against Liverpool, which is to play with Jorginho and Rice and have two better progressors, two controllers, if you like, of the ball. And I think that is why in the first half in particular, we were so dominant in those opportunities in
Felt like a
creating
dream.
those
I thought we were
chances.
going to do it 3-4-0, if I'm honest with you.
We should have been 3-4-0. But
Yeah,
that's
within
the
the first
reality.
15.
Yeah, and you asked about the other chinks in the armor. The obvious one, as you say, is finishing. We've kind of touched upon that. We just got to put the ball in the back of the net. I think that's confidence. Defensively, I think that what we're starting to see is mistakes of previous seasons start to creep back in. And
Yeah.
again, that links to the lack of confidence and composure that has come off the back of this recent run of form. When you're not performing as well, you start to see frustration. Now, Zinchenko is obviously not fit at the moment, but when he was getting a lot of heat for his performance, in particular, how he was losing possession in key areas and giving up those opportunities. Now, I think that Zinchenko is still an incredibly important player to how we
I
are as a
agree.
team in possession. And if you think about Arsenal games, all of our good work tends to come really when we're in possession of the ball. And that is what Zinchenko is there for. He's to progress the plays, to be an auxiliary midfielder. He's able to support the left-hand side as best he can so that we can try and suffocate the opposition into their own defensive third. Out of possession, he can do some good things. People saying he can't defend, that's an exaggeration. He can
Exactly. It's just never
defend.
going to be a quality aspect of his. He's never shown that. He's
Exactly.
never going to be one great 1v1. I do think he's improved in his defensive metrics, but obviously I don't really have a leg to stand on when some of the glaringly obvious things. And that's kind of what I mean by accepting players for what they are. I would love to wake up and Zinchenko does all the things you've said and he's great defensively. Gabriel Jesus could score goals, but I do think you've kind of got to accept players for what they are to a certain point and kind of use them appropriately. Like, I do think the better we get as a team, and especially if we address our midfield and there's a lot more creativity, I think the use for Zinchenko, it's not that he can't be used, but him inverting and him being an extra midfielder, if we're better in the midfield third, it's like an accessory rather than a necessity, what we're seeing with Mikel Arteta. So I think you're bang on the money. I don't think injuries have helped us. Like, you know me, because we've spoken about it. I don't really have sympathy for Mikel Arteta or anyone in the league for injuries unless 10 players are out, because it does happen. And I think you made some great points. I think defensively, we're kind of slipping back into old habits. Final third, we're lacking in confidence. I do want a bit more from our fullbacks, but I do think there's a variety of reasons for that. Midfield is very interesting because I have felt for a while that Havertz has found his feet in that 8 role. Declan Rice is doing Declan Rice stuff. And I think Odegaard's actually been all right, but it just feels like collectively I can't put my finger on it, but it does feel like something's missing. Like you made a great point with Xhaka and Havertz, the two very different players. I think the only commonality they have is that they'll both kind of get stuck in. I don't think Havertz, maybe it's unfair to say he doesn't want the ball as much as Xhaka, but he's not really on dictating the tempo and doing all of that stuff Xhaka did. And I think that's probably why we miss Xhaka, is not to dish Xhaka, but it's not exactly like he was Pirlo. I think it's because we haven't got that profile. I do think Martinelli suffered on top of things Martinelli needs to do off his own back. So I think you're spot on, really. And with Declan Rice and his passing, I said it on my channel in August, I think it will take a year. Not to say we're going to wake up and he's going to be this amazing midfielder, but I think it will take him a year to kind of see that quality. And I do think you're seeing an improvement with his progressive passing, but I'm not being funny, but he's in his mid-20s. He's played 200 games in that 6th role. It's going to take a while to kind of do what Mikel Arteta wants him to do in an Arsenal system. And from the moment Declan Rice signed for the club, you could see him kind of say, Arteta is changing my thinking. Now, if you look at it and you go from primary school, secondary school, university, and so on and so forth, and you get to a job and they say everything that you've been taught kind of is irrelevant or is a lie, it's going to take you a while to get up to speed. And I get it. Declan Rice could thread the passes a bit better, but I don't really agree with the general comments that he's basic and just a lot of question marks Declan Rice is facing. I think it's absolutely farcical. I think he's the least of our issues. As you kind of said with Partey's injuries, had Declan Rice not been there, we'd really be in problems. And I think you made a great point with Jorginho. I was a bit nervous for Jorginho in the Liverpool game because I think it's like winning the lottery with Jorginho. He's either going to do that or there's going to be frailties like the Chelsea away game. But I think he played well. I actually think Nelson could have scored, but I think Nelson, Jorginho, and Aaron Ramsdale, the kind of squad players, they did all right. I think Havertz did all right as a false 9. Obviously, putting the ball in the back of the net for him and everyone else is what you're going to live or die by. So it is what it is. What do you make of Kai Havertz generally now then?
Yeah, I thought his centre-forward performance was good, other than the fact he didn't put the ball in the back of the net. You know, I did a piece on this on FL about his movement, the service that he didn't get. There's a moment where Nelson slides in the first half, wins the ball back, plays it to Ødegaard. Ødegaard then can play Havertz in on goal, and he plays the ball behind him. And he then has to push himself wide, and then people are saying, why is he taking these extra touches? It's like, because you've not looked at the pass he received. That's why he's gone
agendas
in that area. In the second half, Saka gets a long ball from Saliba. He should square it. He needs to get his head up and see Havertz there. He doesn't. He traps it, and then eventually the play breaks down. Havertz's movement was really good. He doesn't have conviction in his shooting. That's what he's lacking right now. And I think that is to do with confidence. I'm usually out in the ground about half an hour before kickoff, and they go through their shooting drills. The guy can strike a ball very well when the pressure's not there, but when the pressure's on at the moment, he can't quite seem to do it. And when you just need that bit of momentum, he scored. Obviously, at the end of November, start of December, he was scoring against Luton, against Brighton.
He had a good little patch of form up until obviously recently. You're right.
Exactly. He won November Player of the Month. I think if that goal against Villa, that I personally feel the rules are ridiculous and it should stand.
Oh, I'm with you with that, mate. 100%.
Huge goal, and all of a sudden you've got extra momentum from that. I think that changes but to be honest, from my position of where Arteta's making the mistake is I don't think he should be playing in midfield. I just don't think that's getting the best from him. I think that's hanging him out to dry a little bit. And if it's up to me, with Jesus' form in question, with his goal scoring in question, with his fitness in question, Havertz for me is the next in line to start after Jesus in that centre forward role, above Nketiah, above Trossard. I'd be playing Havertz there every single week if I could, while Jesus has got question marks next to him until the summer, in which I'd love us to go and sign a striker, obviously, because it's not going to happen this month. So for me, I think he needs to continue in that role. I would start him against Crystal Palace there and give him another opportunity.
I think this is where football is funny, because obviously nobody sees things via two different lenses. Like, I actually am on the other side, Tom. I think he should play in midfield in the sense of, I agree with what you said with him in the false 9. And it sounds dumb to say, you know, the striker's done everything great apart from score, because, strikers are paid to score goals. And that's the caveat everyone would say. And I agree. Havertz has never looked clinical in that, not in a Chelsea shirt or an Arsenal shirt. Yeah, he's gone through periods. I think for me, I'd probably keep him as the left 8, because you're here long term. One thing you do have is durability. I do think you look quote unquote settled there. I do think you're not quite the Xhaka replacement. I do think we need someone else. I agree with kind of what you're going with him playing as a false nine, because I don't think anybody's clinical in the Arsenal team, but he gives you a lot more than Eddie Nketiah. He's a focal point. He drops into midfield. And apart from his mediocre sort of output in the final third against Liverpool, I think that worked for Mikel Arteta. But I just think with Kai Havertz, you're another one of these players. You can play everywhere, but what are you? And at least for now, we've got some sort of settlement with Odegaard, with Havertz, and obviously Rice. I don't really want to move that, if I'm completely honest with you, but I guess you've got to be multifunctional in today's day and age. Havertz has shown he can play in a bunch of roles, as long as he's not out wide, which some fans have been trying to suggest. I'm not really for that. What do you make of, as you said, Havertz as a false nine? What do you make of Eddie Nketiah generally? Because he's rumoured to be linked with Crystal Palace and Brentford. Many people would say you've got an England international. Why is he not starting in Mikel Arteta? What do you make of Eddie Nketiah's role? And do you think this is his last season at the club?
I think it should be. I think he's a starting striker that's playing as a sub at the moment, and it doesn't suit him. I mean, his record from the bench is awful. With respect, it's.
He needs a run, really.
Yeah, it's like 50 sub appearances and 1 or 2 goals, and that when you're the backup, which he isn't good enough. And when he starts, he's got a good record. If you look at his non-penalty goals per starts, it's up there with Ivan Toney. That's how good it is. So you need to have a perspective about what that means for the player and the context of the club. And if Arsenal are thinking smartly about what to do going forwards, you need to get the maximum out of every player, whether they're in the starting 11 or not.
Facts.
We've done that before with players that have come off the bench in the past. Like we have what we call finishers sometimes in games. Trossard is a great example of a player that when he comes off the bench, most of the time you bank on him having an impact in the game. Nketiah doesn't have that same thing. And because Nketiah is never going to be the number 1 striker at Arsenal, you have to recognise that and move the pieces of the puzzle so that they fit more, astutely into the side. And so Nketiah does need to be sold. I'm glad we gave him the new contract, because from a financial point of view, we need to make sure that we get in pure profit on our Haaland graduate. So losing Nelson and losing Nketiah on frees, whilst people go, well, why didn't we just sign someone? It's because we couldn't. We wanted to sign Rice and Havertz.
In the summer more than now, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. And we wanted to do these other deals, and we wouldn't have been able to have the depth of Nelson and Nketiah unless we'd have renewed them. If we have just let them go for nothing, we'd be signing these players that we have done and then asking why, somebody else is the backup that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I think that it was right to renew them, but you also have to find the right time to then move them on. And I think this summer coming up is the right time to move both of them on. I spoke to Reece after the game against Liverpool, and he said he's focused on Arsenal at the moment. And whilst I think that that's true, I did get the feeling from him that he's still not happy with the fact that he's not starting enough games.
87 Premier League minutes, you can't be happy.
No, of course not. Of course not. You can't be happy with that, especially when you've signed a new deal. No matter what people want to say about how much we're now paying him, that's, for me, it's a 24-year-old in the Premier League at a club like Arsenal is going to be on about 100 grand a week. That's just the reality.
I'm not paying it. You're not paying it. Why do people care?
Exactly. I really, the wages thing, I think, is a moot point and something that's a bit archaic. But even Havertz gets, talked about with the wages. But when you just signed him from Chelsea in the Premier League,
international
for 65 million, you're going to pay that much money. That's just the reality. And so with that, it's not going to happen in January, because I just don't think, even though we hear things about Palace and we hear things about West Ham, I don't think they're going to put the money up in January that Arsenal want for those players. And that will be another challenge in the summer, is getting the money that we want. Now, I think Nelson, if you get a £15 million bid, 15 around that figure, you probably have to look at taking it. Because for a player that, as you say, gets 87 Premier League minutes, that's 24 years of age, if you get 15 million, I think you've done okay. I think if you can get as close to 30 million as you can for Eddie Nketiah, maybe slightly more, you'd be very happy with that as well. And you look at someone who's got over 100 Premier League appearances, played in the Champions League, scored in the Champions League, England international, you need to look at...
You've got something to leverage there, really.
Exactly. Ramsdale, I think he'll probably look to move on in the summer, even though I've got my own issues with that. £40 million minimum, you should be looking to try and get off him.
Amen.
This isn't when you see kids in your transfer windows put in their list of players and then the list of monies and then the players and what they sign.
It's not
that. I hate that stuff, but and I know there's some hypocrisy here, but I just think that for those specific players, you have to try and maximise, especially with Arsenal's selling reputation. We've got to try and improve that. And I think those three, with Smith Rowe arguably as well in there too.
Oh, I don't start with Smith Rowe, please, God, don't let
I'm
Smith Rowe
sorry,
go. You
mate.
know how I feel about him, but you're right.
Yeah, he's in there.
He is, and it breaks my heart, man. Playing devil's advocate though, just on this Eddie and Nketiah stuff, purely hypothetical, yeah. If we got 30-40 million bid today and there's no guarantee of a striker coming in, would you take that money regardless for Eddie?
I lean towards yes, because I personally, I know we differ on this. I personally see Havertz as a centre forward option.
No, he definitely is one.
Yeah, without even if he's playing midfield, you look at him as a centre forward option. I think you've got Jesus, you've got Havertz, you've got Trossard as just three centre forward options. And I think that's a good, if you're not signing anyone, but you're guaranteeing me that we're going to be able to reinvest that 30-40 in the summer for someone really good, then I think you have to do it. And if that's not there in the summer, then I think you have to do that. So in the midfield, obviously, the rumours are that Partey will hopefully be back at the end of this month. And so if that's the case, I'd like to see Partey, Rice, and Odegaard be the midfield three, in which case then you've already moved Havertz into that centre-forward position. You don't know how long he's going to stay fit for, but even if he's not fit, it's my preference that Jorginho then comes in. So I'm fine with selling Nketiah this month if you can get that much money. I think it would be a no-brainer to do that, even without signing a striker. But if they did sell him for that much, they might look into something or look towards a loan if they can find something like that.
And that's where Edu and Arteta and the rest of the recruitment team are going to have to earn their money and ultimately pull a rabbit out the hat. That doesn't mean we wake up and we sign Mbappe. We'd love it, or any sort of quality player. Just make sure that we can tie over to the end of the season, because I must admit, I know injuries are part and parcel of the game, but it's like watching the same movie and knowing the ending. I am getting a bit frustrated with injuries and stuff at the club. Don't get twisted. We've been dealing with it since August, and I think it's only really been highlighted in the last few months because we've just been ticking over. I think you made an interesting point with Eddie and Nketiah. I must admit, if you asked me that question 2 weeks ago, I probably would have just said keep Eddie, he's a body and things like that. And I still somewhat believe that. But I just feel with Eddie and Nketiah, 30-40 million, I don't think I can turn it down. You put a sell on clause. I do think, he will go and score goals and get a consistent run. I just think the way we're going, it's not what you just can't be here to a degree unless you're improving. It's what we're doing. I think you made some great points with Nelson, and Nelson's a weird one for me because clearly the manager likes you. You clearly liked at the club. You like what you're doing. You are one of the players on the peripheral that while you don't get many opportunities, I always feel that you kind of take your chances. And if anyone was to get a start, it would kind of be you. I look back to the summer, kind of what we're saying, and maybe we was closer to FFP than led to believe. Obviously 65 million on Havertz and all the others. I think Balogun wanted to leave, but the chance to bring some money in, I don't think we might have had money to find a winger, so it was a case of keeping Nelson and you're a body and things like that. But I do really born off the last recent games in that Trossard's form's been on the floor, Jesus' form's been on the floor, Saka and Martinelli's form's been on the floor, but they've been struggling, in my opinion, more mentally than anything, of course, in terms of tactical reasons as well. That's where I would like another winger that Mikel Arteta genuinely believes in. I'm not saying he doesn't believe in Reece Nelson, but 87 Premier League minutes. We played 19 games. You don't necessarily believe in him. If there was a genuine player that he rates that he could take the burden of Saka or put in instead of Martinelli, that's what I kind of want. So I do think for Nelson's own good, he's kind of got to get rid of the romance away from Arsenal and do what you need to do to really put a marker down as a footballer. Like, you're 24 years of age. I don't know if you have 100 Premier League appearances, you must be scraping that, but how many are starts and things like that? Aaron Ramsdale, I feel the same way as you. I don't really want him to go, but if he is to go, we need top money. And I'll do anything not to let Emile Smith Rowe go. But again, if these players have to leave, then they have to leave. I am wary about them all going because it's obviously homegrown things that we need to do and whatnot. What do you make of Martinelli in particular? Because obviously a lot of what we've talked about kind of ties into Martinelli. But I think it's the decision making from Martinelli. I think he needs to go back to basics. Personally, I think he's not getting his head up enough. And I think this is where you see the young naiveties from our players, because it's like, sometimes I feel you just have to accept your poor form. It's like we're trying to fight our way out of it, which isn't wrong, but it's like the more you kind of fight against something, the more it kind of happens. So what have you made of Martinelli? 2 Premier League goals or something like that? It's crazy for someone like him, man.
Too one-dimensional for me.
Facts,
you look at Saka. When he gets the ball on the right, he combines with Odegaard. He'll go right and use his right foot to cross, or he'll go left and try and take a shot or play a triangle. When Martinelli gets on the ball, he's running for that byline. That's what he does. You know, you rarely see him even cut inside, you know, enough. And when he does, it's only for a slight layoff. If he's going to cut inside, he needs to be like the left-sided Arjen Robben at times. I know that's the archetypal example, but that's what I want to see. You know, if you're a player that's got one trick, you have to be the best in the
You
world
have
at
to
that
be
trick. If
amazing
that's
at
all
it.
you do.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Martinelli's not there yet. He's still a young player, of course, as well. We have to remember that. But I need more. And when he does run to the byline, he always does that one touch too many for me. Like just the one
Yeah.
touch.
Yeah.
As you said, get your head
Runs
up,
into blind
find
alleys,
that
man.
cross. I liked his sub performance against Liverpool. I thought he came on and was dangerous. I thought Nelson was unlucky to come off, you know, for him in that game,
Same.
but he did deliver some good contributions when he came off the bench. But yeah, he is too one-dimensional for me. I think he's being found out a little bit. I think the right-hand side defenders are having too easy of a time dealing with him. I think he does get pushed off the ball a little bit too easily now, so I'd like him to be a bit more physical and be better at trying to, because the thing with Saka is that what Saka's great at is rolling away from defenders.
Getting
He
his
knows
body
how
in
to
front of the
use it
ball. Yeah.
100%.
Doesn't get
He
many
uses
fouls, but yeah.
no, he takes a lot for it. You know, you say, I'm sure if you look at the numbers of fouls he wins compared to Martinelli, it's probably quite a gap.
There's a landslide.
But he rolls away from defenders really, really well and uses their own strength and to build his own momentum. Martinelli's kind of like a guy that just wants to run through a wall, but he's not strong enough and physical enough to do that yet, and he doesn't necessarily have the execution either of a consistent enough level to do it. He's a brilliant, brilliant player, and we're lucky to have him. But I just think he needs to reinvent himself a little bit to rediscover that form.
You said it there. I think he needs to reinvent himself, and this is why I said in August. This is why I kind of wanted a striker, because I looked around at our squad and Mikel Arteta said we need around 100 goals. And not me trying to catch the gaffer out. I was looking at how we're going to get these 100 goals. Yeah, the romantic in me says, you know what, Jesus being fit, he might be able to do it. Eddie with chances, assuming everyone keeps scoring. But when I removed that and tried to be a bit more cerebral, the only thing I feel in the attacking players that we have close to a proven goal scorer is Saka, because you've done it the last few years. I said in August, I wouldn't be surprised or not surprised if Odegaard and Martinelli did or didn't do it, because they're learning that tricks and trades of the game. I don't think our wingers are receiving the ball where they're running in behind as much as last season. And I don't think that helps Martinelli. I do think with Zinchenko's inconsistencies, Havertz's teething problems, they've all kind of compounded our problems on the left. But I agree with you in that Martinelli is running into blind alleys. He is lacking confidence. He is one-dimensional. But I love the lad, so I can't really give up on him, really and truly. So we're gonna have to arrest it. I'm not quite sure if I asked you this, but do you think then the trip to Dubai has come at the right time then?
Yes. Yes and no. Obviously, you want to respond as quickly as you can.
100%.
If you ask the players, I think they'd probably say they'd rather play tomorrow, you know, after the Liverpool game to try and put it right. But sometimes you do need to forcibly be taken away from it and have some time. I don't like the predictable reaction of some fans saying, well, they've lost how many games now? We're sending them on holiday. It's not a holiday.
It's not a
They're
holiday.
going out there.
Arteta definitely not having you a holiday. You could be running into some extreme heat. It's not a holiday.
If you think it is, you don't know our manager. Like it's an intense training sessions that they've got planned. They got some really stringent stuff planned. I was speaking to someone at the club the other day, and it's you know, whilst there is certainly time for relaxation, and some of those players have taken some of their family members out there as well with them, which I think is a good thing for morale,
Very
you know,
good thing.
for positivity. I think it's obviously about. One of the things I asked Reece actually was whether he thought it was a blessing in disguise, you know, having this break now, and he said you can look at it that way, but obviously they want to respond as soon as possible. But it is going to be a chance to he said be together outside of the usual environment, which I think is a really nice way of putting it. But it gives them a chance to work on things. The injured players are going out there as well. So Timber, Partey, Zinchenko, Jesus and Vieira all going to be there as well. So yeah, it's a really good thing, I think, and hopefully will be a bit of kind of a just draw a line under what's happened and go into Palace under a clean slate and with expectations of pushing on.
Like you said there, man, it's just drawing a clean slate. And I think it is a good thing. Like you said, obviously there's going to be time they can chill with their family, but people forget togetherness. I'm not saying Arsenal isn't together, but I think a big reason as to why we did what we did last season and we've kind of announced ourselves as being a title challenger has been that togetherness and that fight and that galvanization. And I think we need to get that back. And as you said, you're in another country, it's a different environment. I think we need to get back to that. I think a few years ago, we actually went to Dubai, I think when Guendouzi was here, and that kind of helped us a bit. So I think anytime you can get these advantages, why not?
I think we went last season as well.
You seem to love
after the
America in
World
Dubai,
Cup.
man.
Yeah, after the World Cup we went because obviously some players were still playing, and then we played against Lyon and Milan, I think it was,
Yeah.
in those Dubai Cup, I think they called it. So yeah, what was the question? Sorry, I was talking over you rudely.
No, man. I was just echoing your point in that I think it is a very good thing. We need this togetherness. It's a time to be outside your environment, and I think the family element. Obviously, if you're there's co-workers and then there's like family in a working environment. If you lot become family, then you're more likely to fight for each other. And I think that's where we need to get back to, really and truly, because the games have been a bit weird. I think I look at the Fulham game. I think the first 10 minutes we were great, and then we kind of dropped off. I think the same kind of at Anfield. I just think we need to get back to basics. And I always say pressure's a privilege. Obviously, you lose one game at Arsenal Football Club, it's all over. So you look at the current climate, this is what's going to happen. One good run doesn't make you a good footballer or a good team, and likewise the bad things. And it's down to us to salvage the season, whatever is left of it. And that brings me actually to my next question. Like, how do you think we salvage this season? What is salvageable? Because obviously we're out the League Cup, we're out the FA Cup. Depending on what Arsenal fan you talk to, we can go for the league, we can't go for the league. Champions League, I don't know where you're at with it. Like, how do we salvage it? How do we look back in May and it's been a decent season, or we can get something out of this?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because obviously you want to say a trophy, you want to say that's what Arsenal do. But the reality of the situation is that Arsenal aren't favourites for either of the two competitions that they're left in. I think Arteta's right when he talks about taking things at a game at a time. I'll make my judgment in May, and depending on how the season finishes and where we finish, as to what I've thought about the season as a whole. The Champions League is an opportunity. It really, really is. Porto are a team that we should be beating, but I said that about Sporting in last season's Europa League, and you saw where that got us.
Yep.
So I think that you have to take the Champions League as a fantastic escape from the Premier League pressure, and just see the Champions League as just a great opportunity to see what you can do.
We've got nothing to lose. No one thinks we can win it, so might as well try.
Exactly. We have nothing to lose outside of that game against Porto, because I think after Porto, you're in the realm of, it's anyone's really.
So I get scared, the Madrids and etc.
Indeed, but you look at what we've got. Hopefully, we have their suggestions. Timber might be back for the second leg of the Porto game. That's the earliest we could ever see him back. I think that's in March time, and that is the earliest an ACL injury after 7 months can be recovered by, and he's doing really, really well in his recovery. So let's wait and see. Partey, of course, if we can keep him fit, it's a massive, massive asset to us. We lost key players like Saliba and Tomiyasu at the end of last season. If they can stay fit for the run-in, that's obviously going to be a huge benefit for us as well. And if we can find our goal-scoring feet, then teams are in trouble, because, as I said, this team are creating huge amounts of chances. So if we can start finding the confidence and momentum to score, it changes everything. So if we were to, really put Crystal Palace away when we host them, Forest has been a really difficult ground for us. If we can go and win there, that builds up confidence as well. And then you've got Liverpool. And as I said it about the FA Cup game, and we really nearly did it with the chance we created. But if you win that game against Liverpool, that is an unbelievable boost to confidence, and it changes the whole conversation about where Arsenal are this season. Win your next 3 games, and you are more than just in the title race. So it's that simple. But drop points against either of Palace or Forest, and it's the complete opposite. So it's really difficult to say, how do we salvage the season? It's a shame that we're even saying salvage the season at this stage. But it is about, I think, trying to just win the next game, and then use that to go into the next game, because the more points we just drop, we can't get too far ahead of ourselves, because the bigger picture becomes very small if you drop points in another game in the next 3 or even the next 2 or 1. So, it's about the next game, and we need to respond really strongly.
Facts. I always try and look at life, Tom, with balance. Like, if there's reasons to be negative, consider them. If there's reasons to be positive, I do think there's negativity around our club and question marks. And I think there's reasons to be optimistic. The key one for me would be, it could be a much better position we're in, but it could be a lot worse. The one luxury we've given ourselves is when we weren't playing well previously in the season, we're getting dramatic equalizers, we're winning games, we're doing what we need to do. We're still in and around the pack. We're going to drop points. Other people are going to drop points. And I think, a week is a long time in football. So when we played 19, 20 league games already, you could imagine the sentiment. People said City were finished. Look where they are in the table, and you look at all the others around us, we're still kind of in and amongst the pack. The only thing, I guess, beyond the obvious in hindsight that I'm truly negative about is that while I know you can't win them all, had we have won some of these games, we start Usain Bolting away from everybody, really. And it can come down to fine margins. So we're going to have to get on with it. I'm pretty sure you've been asked this question. Like, if we don't win a major trophy, I know you know what's coming. Like, if we don't win a major trophy, does Arteta get the sack, man? It's crazy, isn't it, man? It's absolutely crazy, my guy.
Yeah,
Oh, man.
yeah.
I'm happy.
So you
else
asking me the
answer
question? Do I sack him if we don't win anything? Look, it very Arteta's future is, at the end of the day, no one's bigger than Arsenal Football Club. No one. And I used the analogy this morning on the show of, like, for me, the goal is winning the title, and we're on this train of trying to get there at the moment. And sometimes the train that you're on doesn't take you directly to where you want to go.
There's delays.
But as long as you're on a train that's taking you in that direction, then you're on the right path, you know? So at the moment, I think we're on a journey towards that. I see Arteta as the coach taking us towards that direction. And I don't think there's another train that's going to get me at the moment directly to that goal. So if Arteta doesn't win the title this season, or doesn't win the Champions League this season, I will look at it and think, if we were to finish second or third, and think, okay, we finished where I thought we would at the start of the season. I didn't think we'd win either.
Oh,
I thought Man City or Real Madrid would win them. Liverpool's an interesting one. I think people underestimate Liverpool because of what they did last season, because they were they underperformed.
Greatly underestimated.
But when you look at the bigger picture of the last half decade, they are always there with City. You know, 9 times out of 10, or 4 times out of 5, or 4 times out of 6, they're there with City, putting in 90+ point seasons. So to think that they wouldn't have been there would have been naive. And I think I was a bit naive about Liverpool, and others were at the start of the season. So if we finish outside the top 3, that's when you start thinking, well, what's happened? Like, and if it's someone like Aston Villa under Unai Emery, then there's some serious questions about that, because obviously he's coming.
You know the language that will start. We should have kept Emery, blah blah blah. Like, don't let that happen.
It's not that. It's not. That's not the conversation. It's how you ask. You don't ask the question of what's happened to us. You ask the question, how have they done that? That's the question you should ask, and then you need to look at, why didn't we succeed in that same way? What mistake did we make? Is it Arteta? I don't think so. Is it some of Arteta's decisions and the club's decisions in the market? Maybe. Has there been some really bad misfortune with injuries that have cost us? So far, I'd say that there has been some, yes, with Timber being a big one, Partey being an even bigger one.
Jesus every now and again as well.
And so whenever anyone asks me, like, what's it going to take for you, Tom, to want Arteta gone? I'm like, it's a really weird question, bro. Why are you asking me that? It's so weird. Because, you know,
I'm happy
it's
to
like
ask someone else. It's normally me, and I'm sure you get on your platform, my guy.
It's like everyone has to have a stance, you know. You always have to have a cutoff. And I'm like, no, I don't have a cutoff. I judge things on merit about where we are and what's happened and why it's happened. It's not a case of, if we finish here, he goes. Because what if we finish 4th or 5th or 6th, and it turns out our entire first team has gone, or for some other reason? If I can point to Arteta and say, he is the reason why we're going backwards. He is the reason why we are not being as successful as we should. And that word "should" is a subjective term, you know. So when it comes to Arteta, at the moment, as I say, I think we're going in the right direction with him. Yes, he may not match the overachievement of how we performed in the league last season, but I still think I don't see an alternative right now that is going to get us quicker to that destination.
I'm with you with that. I think, you know, I always say, who else are we going to get in? And for me, it's a thing where I'm not just saying that to keep Arteta necessarily. I support, as much as I admire Arteta, I support Arsenal. If there was the next Pep Guardiola and he genuinely wanted to sign for Arsenal, in the same way that I like Gabriel Jesus, if there's a better striker, then this is just the business, the nature of the beast, really and truly. I do think my biggest problem with Mikel Arteta, or just generally with Arsenal, I don't want this to be in vain. Like, Arteta is a relatively new manager. I don't want him to make mistakes and do good things and just learn from Arsenal, and we haven't won anything. And he says, oh, you know what? XYZ didn't work at Arsenal. When I go to Real Madrid or wherever, this did. Let me try something else. I don't want it to be in vain. When I look at when Mikel walked into this club to where we are now, cannot have anything but praise for him. We actually got some belief. Players are improving. We'll be here all day talking about those things. if I go off last season, where we're trying to announce ourselves as potential title contenders, then the life is harsh, the league is harsh. I have to be a bit harsher. And although I feel there's some things out of his control, I do think maybe potentially with some of the recruitment, as much as I've admired it, maybe we haven't necessarily maximized resources. Maybe we're betting on some players that are not necessarily good enough. And I do feel this season in general that there's been, and we kind of said it with the Fulham game, very few times when we've dropped points have we been outplayed better yet. So Mikel Arteta has shown me he's a great tactician and whatnot, but there's those games that make the difference, and I have to see us win. I think we've still got this element of making things harder for ourselves on the transfer market and on the field. We still have these elements of self-capitulation, and I think it's a bit different. But then you look at the West Ham and Liverpool games, we were the better team, but that doesn't really mean much because them guys scored the goals and we didn't. They're the kind of things I'd say for me, if the metrics in terms of, you know, how we're defending and scoring and the players improving and him learning from mistakes, if they're not there, then I have question marks. I don't think I'm necessarily Mikel Arteta in or out. Right now, it looks like for me, I'm more lean towards keeping the man. But if things get worse, then there's issues. And I'm a big fan of just, if there's every reason to praise the man, as there has been in climates, praise him. If there's reasons to be negative, ask questions. As you know yourself, there's a lot of people on both sides who are quite dishonest. Like Arteta could poo in his hands and clap. Some people will praise that. There's some people that Arteta can never do anything right. So it's a bit of an interesting one. To kind of wrap this up, though, I have asked some of my fans for some questions in relation to you. Let me get them up. First one, big up Hugh here said, ask Tom, who is the most responsible for the current bad run of form, players or managers?
Well, as I've said, I think that we are creating enough to win games and we're not putting the ball in the back of the net. So I'd lean towards the players, even though the overall context is the buck should always stop with the manager. But I think the manager's philosophy and system is creating enough for us to win those games. But the players aren't doing it in the final third.
I think Tom articulated that perfectly. I think ultimately everything in life, if you're the manager, is your fault because you're the reflection of the team. But ultimately, if I see a million chances, we're not putting the ball in the back of the net. A lot of you are at Premier League experienced, international footballers, played professional football for a while now. Put the ball in the back of the net or find out why you're not doing that. He's also said, do you believe without signings we can still compete for the league, or are we in a top 4 race?
As in without signing anyone in January,
Yeah.
I think we can still compete. You know, we're 5 points off the top. We play Liverpool in a few weeks' time. Win that game and win the next 2 games. I think the league looks very, very different for us.
Yeah.
So, of course, we're still in it. And I don't think that signings are vital to still win it because I think you can win it with this squad. I think we need some players to come back from injury, of course. Obviously, injuries, a signing would help, but under our current restrictions, I just don't see it happening.
That's the thing. I think we just need bodies to keep ticking over. Any more injuries, God forbid, we're in issues. And I think such is life. Unfortunately, when if we wake up tomorrow and Timber, Tommy Asu, and all these guys are back, such is life. A couple of other players get injured. You can never have everything in it, unfortunately. Terrell Gunner TV, big up yourself, has said, talk about Onana and the striker situation. Not quite sure what he specifically means for you with the striker situation, but I assume he's talking about Onana of Everton potentially signing for our club.
Yeah, well, just quickly on the strikers, I think he means obviously that chance of us signing a striker this window at next to 0, because the strikers we want, we haven't got the financial freedom, not the money, the financial freedom to be able to go and get them. And I'd rather Arsenal sign the right player than fill a space in a squad with somebody that proves not to be an upgrade or push the needle for us. Onana, Arsenal have liked Onana for a long time, like way before he was with Everton. They liked him when he was at Lille. And whilst they will explore the potential for what Everton might want, if the player is interested, there's been no contact between Arsenal and Everton with this at all. But, feelers are put out to players, to intermediaries, to representatives of loads of players. And Onana will be one of those that there are. But it's just kind of what football clubs do. They just put feelers out to clubs. It could be a WhatsApp message. Yeah, it could be a phone call. Most transfers are actually done on WhatsApp these days, believe it or not. So, it's a very, very interesting player to sign. I think it would be a good option for us. But I still think there's better players than Onana out there that we could probably get.
I'm with you. I think there could be better players than obviously Onana. I do like his profile. I think he gave a great addition of himself at Goodison Park last year. As you said, we've looked at him before. He doesn't look it, but he's in his early 20s. He's 6 foot odd. I think he could be a great option in the squad. Whether he's the guy that I see long term playing with Declan Rice and Odegaard, I'm not quite sure on that, but I wouldn't be against him. Chuck has said, "Who's the best striker for Arsenal?" I assume he means in an ideal world, who would be your number one target?
The striker position.
Yeah. There's been a lot of names, man. Even Bro Your Morale today as well.
Yeah, I don't think that's true.
I think that's nonsense.
Yeah. Who would be my number one? Look, if you can afford him, get Victor Osimhen, obviously, I think. Because I don't see anyone else of his level who's not already at the club they're going to be at, like Haaland and City and, whatever. So Mbappe, I don't think we can get. Even if he's on a free, I don't think we can get him because of the wages and the finances involved in that.
Ruin our club.
If not, Patrick Schick's a player that really intrigues me. He's come back from injury recently. He came back, scored 3 goals in his return, but he scored some mad goals numbers last season. And there's always been one of those players that's moving into his prime now. And if he takes that next step, could he explode and be the next 30 goal a season striker on the market? I like Openda at RB Leipzig as well.
He was at Lens last year, yeah.
Yeah, Lens last year, and he's doing really, really well at Leipzig this season as well. So he's another player I like. Boniface at Leverkusen has done really, really well.
You said that. Yep, and he's an Arsenal fan as well. Bring him to the carpet, man.
Yeah, he looks very, very good. And I like Gyökeres at Sporting Lisbon. He looks very, very good. His numbers are excellent. So even like outside of just goal scoring, his shot creating actions are really high. So he's like a bit of an all-round package. So he's one to keep an eye on, I think, as well.
I think mine would be Osimhen. I can't lie. I think I've kind of gone off him a bit, but just off the basis of Mikel Arteta wanted him, I'd explore the conditions with Havertz just to see, because you scouted him so much, maybe Arteta's got something. But as me and you both know, talking about a striker right now is a bit redundant, because I'm sure that will be one for our summer content and things like that. Can Jesus be a replacement for Saka on the wing?
Yes, he can, but not as a starter. I think you bring in a centre forward instead of a wide player, and then if you want to rotate Saka out, you can put Jesus there and give Saka a rest. So yes, I think you can, but not as like, I wouldn't be in our big game of the season be playing Jesus over Saka, obviously, on the right. Even if
I'm with you with that, man. Like, I think if anything, Jesus is more likely to take Martinelli's place off that left hand side than off. I can kind of understand why Saka plays day in, day out for Mikel Arteta, because he's the star boy, he's your difference maker and things like that. Last question. Beta Facts, appreciate you. He has said, or she, have we installed our own handbrake? Slower, more methodical build up is more than just other teams responding to Arsenal's threat. And that's the first question, and he's got another one.
I think I want Arsenal always to be a protagonistic side, that takes ownership of what they do. Some people have said to me that we need to be better at counter-attacking. I think what they actually mean is like,
we're quite good at that. Really?
Yeah, I think we are, but I think sometimes we lack a little bit of speed on the counter and urgency, and sometimes we can slow the ball down, trap it, instead of actually going for the juggler and taking the ball to the opposition. I think maybe that's because we lack a bit of speed in our attack. We don't really have a centre forward with loads of pace, so we don't have it in that same sense. But I'd like to see Arsenal maybe be a little bit shrewder. Like, if we are dominating the opposition, we're really struggling to break them down, start not giving the ball away, but just being a bit tactical about giving up possession in some ways, so that you invite the opposition out and then hit them. Like, you see teams do that. It's really surgical how teams can sometimes put other teams into a false sense of security. But to be honest, I usually know if we're going to win a game within the first 5 minutes. Sometimes you just know. Like, the Brighton game was a great example of like, we're going to win this.
That day, man.
Yeah, like the first 5 minutes, we're on it, just like absolutely battering. Like, every time that we missed a chance, we were getting the ball back within about 20 seconds and going again. Like, you just know in those, the Sevilla home game, the Champions League was another one. But those games, you just know Arsenal are really on it today. And then there's other games like the Fulham game, you're like, oh, crap. Like you just know it's not there. So
or you get the
even though
Liverpool ones where
the
first half's amazing, second half
Yeah.
you want to cry really and truly.
Indeed.
I think you're bang on the money with that, man. How important? Last question: how important is the left 8/space? Can we free other players and add artificial depth by playing Havertz as a forward? And they've also said to say that. What do you think about Odegaard in that left 8? Very good question, if I'm honest.
It is. I think Odegaard on the left is something that maybe we do need to experiment with, because I think Havertz's best position as a midfielder is on the right, not in the left 8. I think he's better playing like he was at Leverkusen when he played with Brandt left. He was right. So yeah, I think that's the best way forwards. But it's difficult, isn't it, to ever see Arteta doing that? I think that Arsenal need to, obviously, when Partey comes back, to use Partey, Rice, Odegaard as the 3. Get some real progression. It's interesting. Out of those two, in Partey and Rice, who plays further forward for you out of those two?
Oh, do you know what? That's a cool question.
Because I like Rice. I think Partey's a better progressor. Yeah, I think that's what will happen. I think Partey will be the one that sits deeper. But in some ways, Partey's better at
that's what I said is a good question.
Yeah,
it's just a tricky one. Do you know what I would say? Because I don't know, because I think with Rice, it's like having a seatbelt on. He just makes me so confident on the recovery. But I'm going to say Rice because we are seeing him improve in the final third. While Arteta has never off his own back told me that he wants to make Rice this all-action midfielder, it looks like he wants to improve him in the final third. And obviously, Partey's got the legs, but has he got the legs and the engine and the discipline to do that to Rice's level? So I'd probably say, you know what, Partey, you be the childminder. Rice, you go for venture further forward. And that's what I want to see, you know. Again, up until a point, we didn't really see our first choice front 3. And I can't tell you, apart from maybe when we ended the City game, and I might be wrong, when we saw Rice, Partey, and Odegaard really and truly. Like, it's quite crazy that we haven't seen, well, Arteta's never told me that's our first choice trio midfield, but that's what I think it should be, like yourself.
At the start of the season, obviously, he played Partey in that weird role on the right-hand side because I think he wanted Havertz, Jesus, and Partey and Rice all in the team. And so he was trying to find a way of how do I do that? And the way you do it is not play Partey at right back. He wasn't playing right back. He was playing this hybrid.
Yeah, he was inverting and whatnot.
Inverted position. Timber was on the left, obviously, at the start. And then I think Kivior was in the second game. And then Zinchenko was against Fulham, I think.
Yeah.
And I just think all of our metrics are actually up. Like, I looked at the metrics from the first 3 games of the season. They were all up on our metrics from the average of the previous. I know it's a smaller sample size, but that does tell you something. And even Partey individually playing in that role, his stats are way up on his average for last season in those first 3 games, playing in this hybrid role. So I know it didn't look great on the eye at the start, and I think it's because it was a bit disjointed and new, and we didn't really know how it worked.
Anything new is going to shock people at first, man.
No, of course. And I think there was always going to be a bit like, well, look, we were sick last season. Why aren't we sticking with that? Well, go back to Ben White, right? There's always a reluctance to change when something's going so well. But actually, we do need to find a new way of winning because it didn't do enough last season.
Careful, they say they want Arteta to do that, and he does it, and they've got issues. That's one thing I feel sorry for. We can't win
as well. And it didn't. It hasn't worked necessarily. I know White's been struggling with an injury of late, but I do think that if Partey comes back and he goes back into that right back slot, there'll be meltdown, obviously. But I would be curious just to see how it plays out.
As long as it means Big Gabriel's not dropped, I don't mind it.
Yeah, that was silly.
That was crazy.
Like Saliba and Gabriel all day long, but yeah,
one of the best defensive partnerships in the world and the league, really and truly. Like,
I think there was something behind that, though, more than what we were kind of thinking. Because there was the Saudi stuff, if you remember, with Gabriel. I think there was more to that than meets the eye.
So would you reckon it was not? I don't want to say a lack of focus from Gabriel, but was his head was turned? But was it kind of turned?
I don't know anything. I just think there might have been more. I was told it was tactical by the club, but that's what they would say. So I don't know. Yeah.
My last question for you then, Tom. Would you keep Ramsdale in for Crystal Palace?
Yep.
Because that pass was so sexy to Reece Nelson. So I wanted Nelson to get an assist, man. Like, oh my God.
I would. I think this has been the biggest mistake on Arteta's part. I really do. And this isn't a slight on Raya. I actually think Raya is an ever so slightly better goalkeeper, technically, than Ramsdale is. But he's older. He's been in the Premier League longer.
He's Spanish. The philosophy is a bit different over there.
Yeah, he's been not longer in the Premier League, but he's been playing, I think, with obviously a better side under a better coach in Frank than Ramsdale had when he was at Sheffield United, playing a very different go long system. You know, Sheffield United and previous to that Bournemouth under those Eddie Howe and Chris Wilder, just get rid, you know, on your goalkeeper. It's not about playing out from the back in the relegation battle. Whereas Raya at Brentford's been able to be more, you know, technical and develop that. And Ramsdale was doing that at Arsenal. Yes, it's not necessarily there in the same way, but I think his execution can be better than Raya's if he's able to kind of stick to it. And that's been interrupted. And I just think Arteta's created this unnecessary dynamic that I think he feels committed to now. He feels like he's got to see it through.
Go with it now, innit? Yeah.
If you go back to Ramsdale, it's like, well, why did we do that? So, but I think actually it takes maybe a better person, a better manager to recognise that.
My bad.
Hold your hands. I got that wrong, guys. You know, I tried something. I thought it was going to benefit us. It hasn't. It's not cost us big time. And now Ramsdale's played really well against Liverpool. Play him against Palace. He won't, but you know I would play Ramsdale against Palace. Yeah.
I mean, me and you have spoken at length with Raya and Ramsdale. I think, in short, among with everything, you know, I think if we were that close to FFP, as you said, if he believes Raya can get us a few percentages closer, entitled to do that. But if we were really close to this FFP budget, I do wonder what was the point. And I'm one of those. I love Ramsdale. I like Raya. I don't really care who's in goal. I'm not in either camp. It is what it is, sort of thing. I just feel, had he have got like a prime Petr Cech or something like that, which is not on the market, if you got one of those, I think this wouldn't have been a story, because what could you say? You know what? Fair play, Ramsdale. He's numerous brackets ahead of you. You're kind of both there. You've both got your pros and cons. I would like Ramsdale to, you know, play a lot more. I do like Raya. I do think it would actually be harsh to drop Raya, because I do think one thing I have liked beyond anything, I think he's actually gone under the radar in a nice way. Like, you're doing all right kind of now, but I'm sure you're going to be asked about Raya and Ramsdale. The same for me. And every good or bad game, those talking points among with everything is going to be discussed. But yeah, man, Tom, I know it's your day off. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Appreciate you for chopping it up with me on this hour. Let people know where they can find you and any content you've got to come out, even though they probably know where they can find you.
No, thanks, man. It's always an absolute pleasure to chat with you. Every morning, 8 a.m, the Gooner Talk on YouTube, at the Gooner Talk TV, or at Tom Cantamini on Twitter. You can find all my written work at football.london.
So you know where to find him. Again, I'm pretty sure people, by the time you're listening to this, his YouTube name will be in the title. All you need to do is click that, subscribe, have a butchers of his content. And yeah, man, hopefully Arsenal get their season back on track. But for now, people, like, comment, subscribe to the channels, and we're out. Tom, stay blessed, my guy. Peace. Safe, my man.
There's always just that accurate red light. Defenders have been given, like,